and he will be doing a presentation on Thursday, August the 27th, same time. And his topic is COVID-19, evil through the lens of the wicked continuum. And if you want to know what that's all about, tune in Thursday, August the 27th. Anyway, you didn't come to hear me chat. So I can't get to your bio and resume, Dr. and Rabbi Goelman. So I'm going to let you kind of give your, a little bit about yourself, and we'll turn it over to you now. And thanks so much for coming tonight.
Yeah, thanks to everybody for coming. You've asked me to talk about two things that I love immensely, Judaism and baseball. And in my life and in my living life, daily life, those are two things which interact regularly. And so I'm really delighted to have an opportunity to sort of share how growing up as a Jewish person in the 20th century, 21st century, I've been able to learn from both Torah and learn about baseball. And I just want to say ahead of time that I might be introducing some notions that you haven't heard before, because I'm going to be drawing on the body of Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, which informs us a lot about Jewish mythology, Jewish meaning, Jewish spirituality. And I might, from time to time, throw out a term that you might not have heard before or understood before. So I really encourage you to put that in the chat box so that if you're confused about something or you want to challenge me on something, please put that in the chat box. But I've asked to be able to go through the presentation because there's a certain pathway I want to walk with you. And I really appreciate your attention and really appreciate the invitation to share. So if you're ever in the Sistine Chapel, you might have looked up and seen Michelangelo's painting, but you didn't see the detail in it where the divine is handing off a fastball to humanity. And that's why I started this by saying that on the 8th day, we know what happened on the first 7 days of creation, but on the 8th day, God created baseball. So let me just start with a little comment about the number 8 in baseball. We know the number 9 is important, but number 8 in Judaism is very, very important. And I'll just read this briefly. The symbol for the number 8 is infinity. It suggests the out of the ordinary, the miraculous, the unexplainable. In Judaism, the number 8 suggests time beyond the 7 days of creation, the miraculous birth and survival of an 8-day baby boy, the miraculous 8th day of Hanukkah, when light was spread into the world, and the festival known as the 8th day of solemn assembly, Shmini Atzeret, the holiday beyond the holiday of Sukkot. So with the number 8, we enter into the unknown. So some of what I'm going to talk about is drawn from this book, which came out a couple of years ago, What is Jewish About America's Favorite Pastime? I did object to the title, that it's not just America's favorite pastime. But some like-minded folks got together and said, you know, we've been talking about Judaism and baseball for many years, and many of us have met, but we've never really put our energies together. So I thank the two editors, Markley Raphael, who's a professor, and Judith Abrams, who's a professor in Texas, who were inviting me to be part of this discussion. And my contribution to that volume was this book, this chapter, Mythic Baseball, Mythic Judaism, Time, Space, and the Journey of the Soul. And I'll unpack that, that title as we go along. And what I mean by mythic baseball and what I mean by mythic Judaism, hopefully will come through in this presentation. So let me talk a little bit about what we're going to do this hour or however long we talk together tonight. We will look at core spiritual understandings in Judaism and baseball, and explore the ways in which those two core spiritual understandings are expressed through Judaism and baseball. We will do this through a consideration of art, text, symbol, ritual, myth, fiction, psychoanalysis, and poetry. During this hour, we will not do any of the following. We will not focus on Major League Baseball. That's not the focus of this discussion. We're not going to focus on great and some not so great Jewish baseball players. Even though I love Sandy Koufax probably as much as anyone, if not more than anyone. And here you see one of my prized possessions, Sandy Koufax's rookie card from 1955. So I've always made this promise to my wife that if ever the house is burning down, I will get her and the kids out, and then I go back for the baseball card. So I got my priorities straight there. But we're not going to talk about Sandy too much. And I will always value his autograph on my bar mitzvah invitation forever. I invited him when I was 13 to my bar mitzvah. My classmates all made fun of me. And then about a week before the bar mitzvah, I received this in the mail. And it means a lot to me. But Jewish baseball players are not the focus of our presentation today. This gentleman is Yosef Chaim, was a leading Baghdadi Chacham, an authority in halakha and a master Kabbalist. This gentleman whose picture we're looking at, known as Yosef Chaim, Yosef Chaim mi Baghdad. He's from Baghdad. He was known as a great halachist. He knew Jewish law as an expert. And people went to him for decisions about Jewish law, and he was always an authority on that. But he had the rare combination of talents and insights and knowledge to also know the secrets of Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. He's best known as the author of a work on halakha called the Ben Ish Chai. And so he's actually known by his name of this book, the Ben Ish Chai, a collection of the laws of everyday life interspersed with mystical insights and customs addressed to the masses and arranged by the weekly Torah portion. Now, much of what we know from the Ben Ish Chai, because much of what he taught was inspired by this book here that we're looking at, called the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Creation. The Sefer Yetzirah is a mystery in and of itself. We understand that it was written sometime in Spain, probably in the 10th or 11th centuries, and it preceded that the great volume of Jewish mysticism known as the Zohar. The Zohar, to all understandings, is written in the 12th century in Spain. Sefer Yetzirah preceded the Zohar. And in this book, the author of the Sefer Yetzirah, and we don't know who it was, talked about creation, the forces of creation in the world. How was the world created? Through a combination of Jewish letters, Jewish words, and numbers. The Ben Ish Chai proposed this understanding of the world, that there are three dimensions to reality that we all experience: Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. Olam translates as the word world, the journey to or through sacred space, that wherever we are in the world, wherever we are in physical space, we're actually in sacred space, because the divine inhabits all of creation. The second aspect of creation that always comes into play is Shana, year or time, the journey through sacred time. And the third dimension is what's called Nefesh, the soul, the sacred journey of the soul through sacred space and sacred time. Let me give an example from the Bible, from the Torah, how these three dimensions can work together. Moses. Moses was born into the world in a very specific place. He was born in a very specific time when we were slaves in Egypt. And his life was a sacred journey where he went through a relationship with God and a relationship to the Jewish people that brought spirituality into the Jewish world. And thanks to that journey that he went through, we are the inheritors of the tradition that he taught and wrote through the Torah. So we're going to see how these three terms, Olam, Shana, and Nefesh, not only are elements of Jewish mysticism, but can teach us a lot about the game of baseball. Let's start with olam, world. This is the journey through sacred space. Now, in Judaism, we have lots of different sacred spaces that we create, where we celebrate our Judaism, where we grieve, where we mourn, where we dance, where we sing, but we're contextualized in a space, olam. Space. We started out many thousands of years ago when Abraham, our father, went with his family, trekked from Babylonia up through what was then Turkey and Syria and Iraq, and down into what we call the Holy Land, into Israel. So that journey was through sacred space. God took us through this journey, and the journey itself and the spaces that we inhabited along the way were very informative and really influenced the development of Judaism. Another map comes to mind that when we left Egypt, the traditional route of the Exodus takes us through a couple of different pathways. Archaeologists aren't exactly clear if we went the northern route, the way of the Philistines, the middle route, the way to Shur, or the lower route, wilderness of Paran, which bordered on the wilderness of Zin. So space was very important to us as Jews. We were always going through different spaces, through different places, and the physical world around us shaped us, and we shaped the world around us wherever we live. Here are 3 physical spaces that we create and celebrate in as Jews. In October, after Rosh Hashanah and after Yom Kippur, we celebrate the holiday of Sukkot. And the most important celebration of Sukkot is to actually build a sukkah, a kind of structure that our ancestors built in the desert from leaves and palms and sticks and stones. And the commandment is to dwell within the sukkah, leishev basukkah. This is the physical space we enter into at the beginning of Sukkot. Tradition has it that we should, the interesting word is leishev basukkah, which means not to sit in the sukkah. That's a different Hebrew word. That's lashevet. Leishev means to dwell in the sukkah. And that's why the principal mitzvah of the sukkah is to sleep in it, to dwell within it. It is a very, very special place. And when we celebrate the holiday Sukkot in our sukkah, we have a lovely tradition called, the Aramaic word is ushpizin. We invite in guests. We invite in matriarchs and patriarchs. We invite in people who have formed Judaism through the millennia. And an emerging tradition that many of us have adopted is, in addition to going back to our matriarchs and patriarchs, we say, who else would you like to invite into the sukkah? Who else is important in your life or has been important in your life? Grandparents, teachers, brothers, children, camp counselors, dancers, actors. Who are the various personalities you want to invite into this special space called the sukkah? Another special space, and all 3 of these spaces, by the way, are similar in that these are mitzvot that our entire body celebrates. It's not just like saying a blessing and you fulfill the mitzvah, but you enter into these spaces with your entire body. So, for example, the mikvah, a ritual bath. The general understanding of mikvah is, excuse me, this is a ritual bath which is primarily used by women after they have had their period to spiritually cleanse themselves. And the mikvah has very special rules about how large, how small, how the water gets into it, how it's filtered. Jewish men also go to the mikvah. Some very religious Jewish men go to the mikvah every morning. Some Jewish men go to the mikvah before Shabbat. And some Jewish men go to the mikvah before any holiday. It's seen as a really important part of literally getting into the holiday by getting into the mikvah. And if you ever have an opportunity to enter a mikvah, I suggest you take that opportunity. The calisthenics involved are really a little complicated. You can't just go into the mikvah up to your knees or up to your waist and say, I've entered the mikvah. No. Your entire body has to be encompassed by the mikvah. So you lift your feet, so you're not standing on anything, and you bend over, so your back is covered by water. And for those few moments, you're like a baby in utero. It's just yourself and the water. And it's an amazing experience. So the sukkah is one physical space, one olam, one physical space. The mikveh is another. And another very joyous space that we have at weddings is the chuppah, where Chatan and Kala, the bride and groom, enter into their symbolic home, the chuppah. Chuppah is for the bride and groom alone. It's not for the rabbi, it's not for the cantor, it's not for the parents, it's not for the in-laws. It's the special space. And what we're saying to the Chatan and Kala, the bride and groom, is this is your physical space. This represents your home, your Bayit B'Yisrael, your home among the Jewish people. And so these are three manifestations of this dimension we call olam, physical space. Here, if you're interested, here are some Hebrew instructions as to the precise requirements for building a mikvah, where the water comes in, where the steps are, where the water goes out. There are specific rules for building a mikvah. And so if you ever hear the term a kosher mikvah, there are such things as kosher mikvahs, kosher mikvahs that conform to all the rules of building mikvah. Now, another physical space that was very important for the Jewish people for many hundreds of years was the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. The first temple, which was destroyed in 586 BCE, and the second temple that was built by King Herod, which was destroyed in 70 CE. This was the main focal point of Jewish practice. We know from archaeology that there were little batei knesset, little synagogues, temples throughout the land of Israel, but the major center of Jewish practice was the temple. And the temple also has its very own, very specific architecture. It's built in a very specific way. And this was where sacrifices were offered. And sacrifice was considered the prime form of Jewish worship in biblical times. Within the Holy Temple, there's a special room called the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh Kodashim. That is the room where the holiest person in the Jewish religion, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, goes to the holiest city in Judaism, Jerusalem, and goes to the holiest place in Jerusalem, the temple. And within the temple, goes into the holiest place on the holiest day of the year, in Yom Kippur, alone. And there in the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies, the high priest speaks the name of God, a Yud Hey Vav Hey name of God, which is never uttered, ever, except in that place by that person at that time.
Hillel?
Yes.
Hillel, sorry to break in, but your audio is breaking up quite significantly. I'm wondering if a connection is a little loose if you're using a microphone.
I'm using the microphone in my computer. How bad is it? Is the breakup?
That's better now for some reason.
Okay, I'll speak more loudly.
Yeah, that's better now for some reason. So maybe.
Okay, thanks for pointing that out, Larry.
Okay.
Okay. We were talking about holy spaces. Sukkah, mikvah, the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. Judaism has existed in many different kinds of holy spaces. The architecture shows that in the Holy of Holies, from the Holy of Holies, the circle on the left, it's a ramp that goes up to the altar where the offerings are made. You'll see that there's an area near the altar that's called the inner court, and an area down below called the outer court. These are different distances from the center, from the Holy of Holies. Here's another space that's considered holy by many people, the baseball field. If we just go back a step, we see that the organization of the space in the Holy Temple involves squares, diamonds, circles, lines, inner spaces, outer spaces, and the baseball field also includes squares, diamonds, circles, inner spaces, and outer spaces. And I'm being a little chutzpahdik here and a little devilish, playing a little bit of a game with you, that you can actually see, and if you've seen the movie Field of Dreams, and if you read the book it's based on, Shoeless Joe, you understand what W.P. Kinsella calls the holiness of the baseball field. Here's one description of one baseball field, Fenway Park in Boston. It was considered by many people an infield of dreams. It figures largely in the story. People make pilgrimages to Fenway Park, the way people had made pilgrimages to the Holy Temple. The layout of the baseball field and the layout of the Holy Temple. Where do all these rules come from? Well, from left to right, we have three people separated by centuries, separated by countries, separated by languages, who have something very important in common. On the left, we have a man named Henry Chadwick, born in England. He was enthralled with the game of baseball, and he codified the rules of baseball. In the middle, we have the Mishnah Torah by the Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. He was also a codifier. He codified the Jewish law in his Mishnah Torah. And to the right is Rabbi Yosef Caro, who lived in Spain much later than Rambam. And he was also a codifier. He was the author of two books of Jewish codes, one, the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, and one that's portrayed here called the Beit Yosef, the House of Joseph. Baseball has its own rules. This was one of my favorite books that I used to read myself to bed every night. Knotty Problems of Baseball. What do you do when there's a problem in the rules? We saw that a couple of years ago in the playoffs when the catcher returning the ball to the pitcher hit the batter. What's the status of the ball? Is it in play? Is it not in play? Is the batter out? Is it an out? Knotty Problems of Baseball. Thanks to Henry Chadwick, he wrote the official rules of baseball. And they read very much like the Talmud. What does putting the ball in play mean? What is a live ball? Henry Chadwick was insistent on the fact that the game had to be played right. So that was space. And so I'm playing around a little bit with the notion that in Judaism we have special spaces, and in baseball we have special spaces. Now we get a little more serious, and we enter into the second dimension known as Shana, or time, or the journey through sacred time. What is sacred time in Judaism? I'm going to call on David Schwartz to read this short piece of text for us.
Like Judaism, baseball is also shaped by the invisible rhythms of time. Virtually every other sport is governed by a clock, ticking off minutes and seconds within an arbitrary set time limit of the half, the quarter, or the period in which play is conducted. Other sports permit strategies of controlling the clock or running out the clock. In baseball, there is no clock. There is just time. A game is 9 innings. An innings is 3 outs. An at-bat can consist of 4 balls or 3 strikes.
And Larry, will you continue with this brief text?
Sure. None of these actions is governed by a time limit. The clock can never stop the play. Neither the individual at-bat nor the game itself can be terminated because of a clock. Just as Judaism has a pulsating organic rhythm that corresponds to seasonal variation and personal experience, baseball is also based upon an organic and experiential time.
Our tradition teaches us a lot through time and about time. Here's a depiction of the Jewish year. If you look down below, it's upside down. You see the month Tishrei, which is now called the Jewish New Year. And if we go clockwise, Tishrei is followed by Cheshvan, which is followed by Kislev. Kislev is the month of Hanukkah. Tevet, Shavat is where Tu B'Shvat is. Adar is where the holiday of Purim is. Nisan is the month of Pesach and Yom HaShoah. Iyar is the month of Yom HaAtzmaut and Lag BaOmer. Sivan is the holiday of Shavuot. Tammuz, we prepare ourselves for the month of Av, which is a sad month, where we honor Tisha B'Av. Elul is the month of getting ready for Rosh Hashanah, and the cycle starts again in the Jewish year. Time is integral to understanding what Judaism is about. Time is integral in understanding what baseball is about. Let's look at this a little bit, because the year, according to the Sefer Yetzirah, divides the year into 4 quarters. And the 4 quarters make up one whole. It's a journey around the 4 quarters in time. And here's what Jewish time is about. At the very core of Jewish time, we find the names of some great Jewish ball players. Sandy Koufax, Hank Greenberg, Steve Stone, Ken Holtzman, Mo Berg, names many of us know. And in the middle, I always thought this was an x-ray of my brain, that many of us carry baseball in our core, in our mythology, in our view of the world. And we can understand if we go around the seasons. Spring is the season when we celebrate Purim, Passover, and the 7 weeks of the Omer, leading up to summer, where we celebrate Shavuot, Tisha B'Av, and then the Slichot in Elul, the penitential prayers for asking forgiveness for our sins. This leads us to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, Hanukkah, and then Tu B'Shvat. So the Jewish year is a very significant teaching in Judaism. The year, the month, the day, the time of day. And in the outer circle, we see how the baseball calendar maps onto the Jewish calendar. Opening day, in most normal years when there's no COVID, we have opening day in the spring. And what do we say when the season starts? Everyone's a contender. Everybody starts out with a perfect record. Everybody's a potential World Series champion. Into the summer, Major League Baseball has its all-star game. We pick the best players in the 2 leagues, and they play each other in the all-star game. The dog days of summer. Baseball is a grind. Major League Baseball is a grind. It's 162 games in a normal year. The dog days of summer. Can the players hold up? Can the fans hold up? It's hot, it's sweaty, it's humid. Those are the dog days. And then we get into, in the fall, the pennant drive. Who's a real contender and who's a pretender? Who's going for the playoffs and the pennant? And who is going to get into the World Series and the playoffs? But the timeline of baseball continues. In the winter, the executives get together for what they call the winter meetings. The general managers do trades. They get together. They trade this shortstop for that pitcher, that relief pitcher for that center fielder. The arbitration deadline comes up, a date by which players can apply for arbitration of their salaries. And then towards the end of winter, we move back into spring and spring training. The 4 sections of the year in baseball in Judaism are called the Tukufot, And in baseball, we also have these 4 tikufot, seasons. It would look like this. At the top, we have tikufat Nisan, the beginning of spring when Pesach comes. Going clockwise, you have tikufat Tammuz, during the summer, the dog days. Tikufat Tishrei is the autumn, when day equals night. And winter is called Tikufat Tevet, when the night is the longest during the year. So we had a quick introduction to Olam and Shana. And now we get to the real essence of the matter, Nefesh, soul. And the way this is considered in Jewish mystical thought is the sacred journey of the soul through sacred space and sacred time. I'm not going to get into any definitions or descriptions of what is or is not the soul. I'll let your own imagination take you there. But it's the most spiritual part of yourself. Your soul is an expression of yourself, of your hopes and dreams and fears, your talents, your humor, your life path, your contributions to the world. Your soul, from your birth to the time of your death and beyond, is on a sacred journey. This is the way George Carlin puts it. I'm going to ask Jonathan Berkowitz to read the text on top, the first paragraph. Jonathan?
In football, the object is for the quarterback, also known as the field general, to be on target with his aerial assault, riddling the defense by hitting his receivers with deadly accuracy in spite of the blitz, even if he has to use a shotgun. With short bullet passes and long bombs, he marches his troops into enemy territory, balancing this aerial assault with a sustained ground attack that punches holes in the forward wall of the enemy's defensive line. In baseball, the object is to go home.
So George Carlin, he has this great riff. It's called On Football and Baseball. And he talks about the characteristics of baseball and the characteristics of football. And this, for me, captures the real essence of the difference between football and baseball. In baseball, what's the object? You just want to get home. Holy time. And the soul makes this journey through holy time. Now we have heroes in our Bible and elsewhere. Often the heroes of such stories, oh, my battery's running low. I better plug my computer back in. The hero has a soul. Often the hero of such stories sets out on an adventure in the world. Sometimes the journey is internal, as the hero descends into the depths of the unconscious. If the person survives the descent, and typically many predecessors did not, and not with monsters await in the depths, then he or she is able to undertake the ascent and be transformed. This transformation constitutes a death and a rebirth experience. Who the person was and what his or her conscious world was like is no more. All is transformed. Your soul is continually evolving, expressing itself, discovering itself, and representing itself. So Bernard Malamud wrote about the novel about one particular player, Roy Hobbs, considered the natural, supposed to be the best ball player of his generation. And for those of us who know the story and have seen, well, the movie isn't as good as the book, I have to say. Robert Redford changed the book entirely, unfortunately. But Bernard Malamud describes the journey of the soul of Roy Hobbs. He starts out as a real prospect. He has a chance encounter with some major league ball players in a field, on a farm. He makes a terrible mistake, and his career is thrown off course. Many years later, he finds his way back to the major leagues, He's older, he's mature, he's not the bright young star he once was. And he spends the rest of the book trying to correct the course of his life, because he knows that his soul has been suffering. Two people here. Perhaps both the biblical Jacob and Shulas Joy's Ray Kinsella needed, in their own ways and on their own spiritual paths, to journey through time and space in order to find meaning in their own lives. And one key portal through which they both had to pass through was their own field of dreams, coming home, encountering, experiencing, and learning to be in awe of the wholeness of the universe. These are among the tasks that are undertaken during the journey of the soul. So unmute yourselves for a minute. And there's a picture of a ball player there. Just shout out, who do you think that is in that baseball card on the left?
Ty Cobb? No.
Nope.
Kevin Pillar? That's a joke.
Not Kevin Pillar. Shulas Joe Jackson.
Oh my goodness.
Shulas Joe Jackson was famous and infamous. And the path of the journey of his soul was a very, very complicated one. He was considered the best player of all time at one point. He could throw, he could hit for power, he had speed, he was a great fielder. And yet, he's known infamously as one of the Chicago Black Sox, one of the Chicago White Sox pennant winners of the American League in 1919, who accepted money to throw the World Series. And the rest of his life was spent trying to, I would say, atone for his sin. On the right-hand side, we see a baseball card of another person. This is Jacob having a dream. And in his dream, he sees his soul going up and his soul going down. The journey of the soul. The soul is so important that in Judaism, we have 4 different names for the soul. We're born with a nefesh, which is your primordial soul, what you come in with into the world. As you draw breath and you move through life, you attain the level of ruach, of wind, of air. The next level up is neshama, which means breath. And the third level is chiyah, which means life force. And it's from there, according to Jewish mysticism, that we go from the level of chiyah to being one with God. Back to the Sefer Yetzirah and the Ben Ish Chai. Some of you may be familiar with this chart here. In Jewish mysticism, they try to answer the question, how does God emanate into the world? Like, how can we actually experience the divine in the world? We know from the book of Deuteronomy, Numbers, that we can't see God face to face. The Torah says it. God says, Lo yirani hadam v'chai. You cannot see me and live. Moses asks, Moses begs, Moses tries. The best Moses can do is see the back of God's head. So the Kabbalists say, actually, God's energy flows down to us according to some sort of chart like this. Keter is considered the crown of creation. That's where the divine mind resides. The mind that decides to create a world of 7 days and 7 nights, a sun and a moon and stars. The second emanation is the phenomenon we call chokhmah, wisdom. We need wisdom to be able to see God, experience God in the world. Number 3 is called binah, which is different than wisdom. Binah is understanding. Can we use our minds to figure things out, to puzzle things out, to rationalize? But those intellectual properties are not the only way to experience God. Number 4 is chesed, which means God's loving kindness. We all exist for one reason, and that's chesed, because God gifted us with life. You might be familiar with the term gemilut chasadim, someone who performs actions of chesed, of loving kindness. Balancing chesed is what's called gevura, and this is what we all need in our lives to balance chesed. Gevura means discipline. We need limits. We need boundaries. If chesed is pouring kiddush wine out of the bottle, gevura is the kiddush cup that collects it. We need a vessel or a discipline in our lives to experience God in this world. At the core of ourselves is Tiferet. There's a balancing. We see that Tiferet number 6 is halfway between the top and halfway between the bottom, which means beauty or balance. We all need beauty. We all need aesthetics. We need science, but we also need dance. And we need music, and we need art. And we need the right way to set a table. There's a beautiful way to set a table, especially times like Pesach. Netzach is an energy that says to us, eternity. Eternity. This world was here before me. This world will continue after me. I'm a small speck in the unfolding of the universe. Hod comes from the word hodaya or todah, thankfulness, gratefulness. We look at this universe that God has given us, and we are so incredibly grateful that we can think, that we can reason, that we can do acts of chesed, that we can exert discipline on ourselves, that we can have balance in our lives, that we can see ourselves as part of the unfolding of creation. And there we get to Hod number 8. Gratefulness, Todah. Some people translate it as glory. I prefer Hodaya. Number 9, all of the above 8 sfirot, emanations, flow into Yesod. Yesod means foundation. The foundation of the universe. And from Yesod comes the aspect of Malchut, which means sovereignty. Sovereignty, Malchut. The symbol of Malchut in Jewish mysticism is the moon. The moon hides itself. The moon comes and goes. The moon has different phases. But the moon is symbolic of a relationship with God. And we see this emanation flowing down through creation. This got a lot of people's attention. Here's a baseball tree of life, where somebody says at the top is what's called Ein Sof. God, there's no end to God. Flowing through the outfield, you have right field, you have left field. Balancing right and left field in the center is center field, where Tiferet is, the balance between left field and right field. Coming into the infield, we have first base and third base, power at the corners, and then second base and shortstop, the tandem that creates the energy that flows to the pitcher, who then makes an offering to the catcher. Now, of course, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. Here's an alternative tree of life. This by Reuven Goldfarb. He says, no, Ein Sof is really center field. You got right field, left field. Instead of first base and third base being Chesed and Gvura, we have shortstop and second base. You have the pitcher in the middle. The batter makes it into the tree of life. And the catcher is the center of the action there. One of my favorite Far Side cartoons. Woman is telling the cop that she sees a man crushed by a baseball, and what does she say? And then wham! This thing just came out of left field. Another understanding of baseball. Karma. The world operates in strange ways, but it all comes back to Judaism and baseball. So, hopefully I've piqued your curiosity a little bit. There's a couple things you might want to read to take yourselves a little bit further. Tree of Souls is a book of stories. It's called The Mythology of Judaism. And Howard Schwartz combines legends and myths from the Talmud, from the Bible, from the rabbis, from Kabbalah. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful collection of stories about symbolism in Judaism. And beautifully, he calls his book The Tree of Souls. A professor at Harvard teaches a course with this title, Baseball as a Road to God, John Sexton. Seeing beyond the game. So it's not just a Jewish obsession to see a connection between religion and baseball. It's in other religions too. It's in other spiritual paths as well. The Cambridge Companion to Baseball, so that the fact that the University of Cambridge in the UK has published what it calls the Cambridge Companion to Baseball means they're saying there's something there. There's something more there than the rule book. And this picture is just a beautiful picture of Ichiro running back towards in center field, hanging up in space, about to make a phenomenal catch. The Cambridge Companion to Baseball. The Temple of Baseball by Richard Grossinger. This is an amazing book. And if you think you understand baseball, and you really have a real good grasp on it, read The Temple of Baseball. And in the graphic novel world, The Golem's Mighty Swing by James Stern. The Golem, part of Jewish mythology. Rabbi Yehuda Leib Lau in Prague, the Maharal, the great rabbi of Prague, according to legend, wanted to protect the Jews from harm. And so he went to the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, and figured out how to create a being. And this being was strong and would protect the Jews. And to activate this golem, he wrote on the forehead of the golem the word emet, which means truth, Aleph Mem Taf. When the golem had finished his job of protecting the Jews, Rabbi Lau of Prague erased the Aleph and was left with the word Met, Mem Taf. He died. So I want to end on a personal note. The photo on the left, my father, Elazar Goelman, taken, I'm guessing, in about 1933, when he was a counselor at a Zionist summer camp in New Jersey. To the right is his youngest child, his second son, Hillel Goelman. Year was 1955. The year, by the way, the Dodgers won the World Series. Yes, Ned Gluck, I was going to say that. And this photo was taken in my backyard in Buffalo, New York. Why am I finishing this presentation with pictures of my father and myself? Although what's curious to me is I'm actually batting left-handed in that picture. I'm not left-handed. I complete this essay sitting in my olam, my physical home in Vancouver, British Columbia. In time, Shana, I live in the unique time frame created by the extra month of Adar Bet, which is given to us in Jewish leap years. The 20th day of Adar Bet marks, this is many years ago, the 6th yortzeit of my father, the anniversary of the death of my father, Dr. Elazar Goelman of blessed memory. My father had the genius and sensitivity to instill within me the love of Torah and to nurture my fascination and love of baseball from my earliest years. We shared the joy and the light of Shabbat and the festivals, and we shared the frustrations of watching the Philadelphia Phillies lose while sitting in dirty, smelly Connie Mack Stadium at 10th and Lehigh in North Philadelphia. Listening to the World Series on radio while sitting on our sukkah deepened my appreciation of both Sukkot and baseball. The journey of my soul will forever be intertwined with the journey of the soul of my father. The journey of my own soul continues to travel through the landscape of myth, meaning, and metaphor on many different levels. The journey of my father's soul will continue through the landscapes of mystery that lay beyond our own consciousness, but I know that our respective journeys will continue to intertwine, dance, kiss, and then separate as we each attempt to answer the Shlomo Rebbe's question. Shlomo Rebbe is a great Hasidic Rebbe, about why in fact we were given the gift of life in the first place, and the gift of standing in the father-son relationship. I don't want to disparage mothers and daughters, but this is coming out of my father-son relationship. The journey of my father's soul will continue through the landscapes of mystery that lay beyond our consciousness. I'll jump to the last line. Halfway through, have fathers and sons, the sounds and smells of the summer night, listening to the game on the car radio and the cosmic struggles that all games can come to represent. May my father's memory forever be a blessing. King he writes on, may it be blessed. So, I'm fine to stop the share and see what might be in the chats. According to my screen, there's 5 questions or comments in the chat, and we'll just pick them up. So Lawrence Bloom tells me that my audio is breaking up a bit. Has that gotten better in the course of the presentation? That's okay. David Schwartz also said privately to me, your sound is breaking up. Any way to fix it? More alerts are hard to hear it. Just like E.T.'s goal to go home, that gives an out of this world aspect to baseball. And David Schwartz, is there anything to baseball being the only game played counterclockwise? What a great question. So besides not being able to hear what I've been talking about for the last hour, I'm really interested in David's question, because in Judaism, questions are much more important than answers. You know, on Passover, on Pesach, questions are the most important, greatest importance. We have the 4 questions, but we have no answers in the Pesach Seder. So David's is one of those great questions that Jews ask, or can ask. Why does it go counterclockwise? I don't know. Maybe it's to balance the universe because everything's going clockwise most of the time. Maybe because time flows in a clockwise fashion. I'll have to think about that, David. It's a great question.
I think it might be Abner Doubleday sort of leveling the field. He may have been left-handed and says, well, we're giving advantage to left-handed pitchers and hitters.
But that's how races are run. Horse races, foot races, auto races are run counterclockwise as well. So it is consistent throughout sports.
Okay, except for football and basketball, but yes, in many sports, things are run in a counterclockwise direction. But I'm glad I did this presentation tonight because I never would have come across that question or any possible answers. Were there any terms or words or concepts I used that were new or different or puzzling to people? Anything I can expand on or explain a little bit more fully?
What resonated for me actually was the fact that baseball is one of the few sports, if not the only sport, I'd have to work it through my mind, that doesn't have discrete time segments and must end at a certain, it's predetermined when it will end, when time runs out. And baseball could theoretically go forever.
Mm-hmm.
A game could literally go into infinity.
Mm-hmm.
And that really resonated with me. I've always felt, no joke, that baseball is almost spiritual in nature. Being a diehard baseball fan myself, a huge Blue Jays fan, but I followed baseball all my life. And I've always felt that it's has a spiritual element to it. Never really thought about why it felt that way. And the time element really kind of brought that home to me. So thank you for that.
There's another one that does, cricket, which is, I think, a cousin of baseball, has no time element. And another, although they're trying to put one in, and another one is golf.
I think if they change the rule and put a time limit on it, I think that would be very disappointing. I think it would change.
I think it would destroy a great deal.
Yes.
Hillel?
Yeah.
Talked about going down into the depths and then coming back up.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be the fate of the Montreal Expos, which were my team?
Well, if I were to speculate, I might even say that the Washington Nationals are the resurrection of the Montreal Expos.
Never. Never.
I said if I would speculate, but I'm not going to speculate.
Good.
The Montreal Expos, well, when the Toronto Blue Jays won the World Series and the first time the Philadelphia Phillies won the World Series, I definitely felt that we've been down to the depths and went to the highest of highs.
Hillel, I wanted to ask you, the number 9 seems to be significant in baseball. 9 players, 9 innings. I don't know if there are other 9s.
Mm-hmm.
Can you relate to the Kabbalistic experience, number 9?
Sure. So, well, we started this presentation with the discussion of the number 8. 8 is considered mystical and spiritual because it's 1 more than 7, which is a very special number in Judaism. 7 days of the week, Shabbat, 7 days before a Brit. The 7th month, counting from Pesach, is Rosh Hashanah. But once we get into the realm of 8, we're into the unknown. And the first number in the unknown that we get to right after 8 is 9. If we go into the 9th inning, who knows what's going to happen? Anything can happen. It's a mystery, and we don't know what's going to happen. It could also be related to the tree of life, which has 10 sfirot, and the 9th sfirah is the sfirah of yesod, a foundation. So number 9 is very foundational in Judaism as well.
Did you just make this all up?
But it's a great question.
Did you just make this answer all up?
Yeah.
Good.
Hillel, may I add a couple of things for you?
Sure.
So my English gematria, the numeric equivalent of the number 9, where if A is the first letter is 1 and Z is 26, then 9 comes out to have a value of 42, which of course is the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Which is also Jackie Robinson's number.
And secondly, the value of baseball, or the numeric value of the word baseball, is 54, which is rather meaningful since that's the number of parshiot they are. And if you triple that, you get 162, which is the number of games in a season. Oh, it's all there.
Jonathan, I miss you so much.
Some people have too much time on their hands.
Yeah.
Working with Jonathan Berkowitz was one of the great moments of my life. He and Ned Glick kept my research project at UBC on an even keel and taught me a lot. And from the sublime to the more sublime.
Right back at you, Hillel.
Thank you. Other great questions. No one asked about the 7th inning stretch. Shabbat. The 7th day you will rest, you will stretch, you will relax.
Can I just throw out something quick?
Sure.
And I'm curious also this is kind of for all the native-born Canucks or people who've been in Canada a long time, but I'd always felt growing up in the United States, since baseball is really the oldest professional sport, that even the song "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" was allegedly written by immigrants who had never actually been to a ball game, but viewed it as an American experience. And to me, there was always a contrast of, in the United States, we don't do multiculturalism. We expect you to kind of conform a little bit, and baseball had always been synonymous with American culture.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the Expos weren't around for necessarily at the beginning, and certainly aren't around now. But that to me struck me as a little bit of a contrast. I don't know if hockey fills that role for Canadians, but of the sport that people gravitate to. But at least in the United States, for a while, obviously baseball is fading in interest a little bit, partially because of that time limit issue.
Mm-hmm.
But it always felt like a very big part of America. And for new immigrants, particularly Jewish immigrants, my dad's side's all from Chicago, Wrigley Field, the old Comiskey, like that was always the
right.
So I'll mute myself, listen to the Canadian thoughts on that.
Well, the next time we do this presentation, I have to include more Canadian content, that's for sure. There is a Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, and as I said, I objected to the title of that book where I had a chapter, What Makes Baseball America's National Pastime. So it's the national pastime that is played in Japan and all through South America and all through Europe and through the Middle East as well. So baseball is a universal, and Judaism is a universal. And we've provided, here in Canada, a very loving home for the Blue Jays. It has the advantage of being in the right place, in Olam, in the world, in the place of the world. The Blue Jays came along at the right time, Shana. I refused to move to Canada until they got a Major League Baseball team. And that's the journey of the soul. And for many of us who remember those 2 World Series that the Blue Jays brought home, that was going from the descent to the highest of the highest.
Let me add
Canadian content.
Let me add something about a Canadian end. I may be one of the only people involved today who actually saw Jackie Robinson play.
Wow.
And actually saw him play in Montreal, where he broke into professional baseball with the old Royals. And I used to sit pretty close to the Montreal dugout. And I got to tell you, I've seen a lot of baseball. He's still one of the finest players I have ever seen in my life.
I'm into that.
So there's a Canadian end. And Black Power matters. Hey.
I think it's interesting, going back to baseball and spirituality and so on. I think it's interesting that baseball has had numerous songs written about it that are of a spiritual nature, like Through the Turnstiles by Neil Young is one that comes to mind. There's another one about the Boston Red Sox waiting for, I can't remember the name of it. It's a wonderful song. You think of movies like Field of Dreams, The Natural had a spiritual element, but not many about other sports, either songs or movies that I can recall, although Heaven Can Wait, a terrific, I think, Warren Beatty film about a football quarterback. But other than that, it seems like there's been numerous, quite a number of songs and movies made about baseball that have had a spiritual element to them. So there you go.
And if we'd sat around and watched Ken Burns' 9-part documentary on baseball, we would hear all those songs. But I just thought of another Canadian connection, though. One of the first games I went to in old exhibition stadium in Toronto, when the Blue Jays were playing, they had a third baseman named Dave McKay. And as I did to every baseball game I ever went to in my life, I brought my glove. I had never caught a ball in a major or minor league stadium. Dave McKay was a left-handed hitter. He fouled the ball. He sliced it into the left field stands, and I caught it. Now, Dave McKay is Canadian. He grew up in Vancouver. And so I kept that ball. And the dad sitting behind me tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, give my kid the ball." And I turned around and I said to the kid, I'm 27 years old. I've been going to games all my life. I bring my glove to every game. And that's why I caught the ball. And the dad said, give my kid the ball. And say, when your kid understands baseball, he'll catch a ball.
Larry,
Yes,
there's one great Canadian hockey song, "The Good Old Hockey Game" by Stompin' Tom, whatever his name was.
Tom Connors.
That's our song. That's our song.
I took Stompin' Tom on a tour through Southern Ontario back when I was very young. But that's another story.
Arthur, I remember I grew up in Ottawa, where you're headed, Hillel. I grew up in Ottawa, and years and years and years ago, they had a minor league. I don't know if it was affiliated with any club, but I always remembered one player who played on that old Ottawa team. And this goes back to the 50s, I'm sure. Eno Slaughter.
Oh, wow.
Who went on and played in the major leagues. I can't remember what team he played for, but
Cardinals. St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah. Anyway, just reminiscing.
Well, you were also talking about Buffalo, where you grew up, Hillel. And Buffalo was in the International League, and they were playing the year that Robinson was with the Royals. The old Buffalo Bisons, I think they were called, weren't they?
That's right.
And I can't remember whose farm team they were, but I remember seeing them play often in Montreal at Delormier Stadium, which was where my dad used to take me on Sunday afternoons for a doubleheader. And that was spiritual to be with them.
Hillel, can I offer something else for the spiritual side of this? One of the books on my in my odd collection is The Physics of Baseball.
Okay.
And one of the amazing things about baseball is that you're trying to hit a round ball with a round bat, which means that the point of contact is really only one point. And that means, and a point has no dimension mathematically. And so that means that this is really a remarkably another aspect of the infinity that you're talking about in baseball, to hit a one at that point of contact, 1 point, one ball around back.
Beautiful.
So that works really well. And I can also tie baseball to Israel for you, because if you delete the duplicated letters in baseball, so we just you take one of each letter. If there are multiple occurrences, you just take one of each. And do a little rearrangement, then it spells Basel, which is where Herzl's from. So, in baseball, if you will it, it is no dream. And that ties baseball to Israel too.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Theodore Herzl, he probably threw out the first ball at the Basel conference, right?
Yeah.
We're giving you material for part 2 of your talk.
Right. It's a work in progress.
Yes.
So Temple Cologne Men's Club, I want to thank you for your hospitality, for the invitation. It's nice to be with like-minded folks, and let's stay in touch.
Hillel, it's been Rabbi Dr. Hillel. It's been a wonderful, wonderful presentation tonight. I know we've all really enjoyed it. It's been so interesting. And thank you so much for giving your time and your presentation. Just wonderful. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight. And hopefully we'll see you in August for Dr. Wexler's presentation. Thanks again, Hillel.
Thanks everybody.
Amen.
Shalom, shalom.
Thank you.
Stay healthy.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.